Welcome, everyone. You're here with Shannon and Paula with Sage Wellness Connections, and we are continuing on our journey exploring the dimensions of wellness. And today, the dimension that we are going to be focusing on is financial wellness. So, welcome.
I'm so glad that we're here today, Paula. I know we always like to talk a little bit about where we came from, why we started doing this, how we got involved. And I always think it's funny if you've heard us talk before that we've had these paths that I think we're just going to interconnect at some point, even though we didn't start out together, but we started very much on the same paths with that recreation philosophy in the background. And so it was just a natural connection as we moved forward that our paths were going to cross, I think anyways. We continued our education to get our degree in human services. And I think that's where I wanted to talk a little bit about today, just because that gave us a little bit of that financial piece that you wouldn't typically think of people that are, wanting to be a part of the wellness industry, that we would have this other side to us that gave us information around strategic planning and logic models and management.
Accounting, our favorite course.
Yes, our absolute favorite for sure. Well, unforgettable for sure. But I think it also gave us some really good information about putting things together, like outcomes and outputs and what you get for that. So whether we apply that to the business that we're doing now or our own personal lives, or when we are supporting people to look at their wellness and that wellness wheel, finances is a big piece of that. And I think this education has given us an opportunity, I guess, to look at it in a different way that maybe you wouldn't typically look at. So in saying all of those things, you can obviously have a look at what else we've done, and the reasons why we've done it is just to push ourselves along that path to be able to support people on their journeys. And whether that be in that emotional realm and that social realm or physical realm, just look at the yoga alone, but also in that financial realm. And fortunately for us, I think because of this project, that's opened the door to meeting other people that also support people in each one of those realms. So we're excited to talk a little bit about that today as well.
Yeah, I agree, Shannon. I think that I know for myself, I was a little resistant about, just hearing the word finances. To me, I almost equated that with like, okay, well, I have to have a math brain or something like that, right? And so always a little resistant to maybe managing my finances to the best of my abilities just because of that resistance. But yeah, learning about the strategic planning alone, thinking forward, succession plans, those kind of things can apply to many areas of your life, like when you're transitioning from one phase of life to another. And so I think that's a great way to kind of segue into our financial wellness.
Absolutely.
So we'd like to always acknowledge the Canadian Mental Health Association of Alberta for bringing forth the Rural Mental Health Project and for sponsoring this workshop.
We always make sure that we talk about the principles of the Rural Mental Health Project, because I think that really aligns to not only us and our own philosophies that we'll get into a little bit more, but also the importance of the project, because we'd like to say that there's many things that are aligned. It doesn't matter whether you live in an urban center or a rural center. All of these principles around the wellness domains are the same. The finances, emotion, physical, environmental, they're the same, but how we manage it might look a little bit different, or our exposures to it might look a little bit different. So the project has really been based around a community driven. So that excites us because every community has their uniqueness, not only in the things that they offer, but the people that live here. So we want to make sure that we're really looking to what we have within our community, and that leaves us that strength-based approach. And the purpose of all the different webinars and podcasts that we've been doing is to highlight those people that are within our community so we can really figure out who we can connect with. And often, as Paul and I were just talking about earlier, sometimes the unusual suspects that we would think, oh, okay, we've got to talk to them because of the finances, they're connecting all these different pieces of the wellness wheel within that financial piece. So it's been so exciting to learn all these things. I find I'm learning probably along with everybody else. So that is quite exciting. And that makes it a community view. So we're looking to all aspects of the community. And I know even the Rural Mental Health Project talks about that whole community view along with that developmental piece, because we're talking about everybody within the community, but also really appreciating where on that journey is the town, the area at in its own development. In speaking about the rural mental health piece, and mental health alone and the stigmas and the judgments, where is that community sitting? How much knowledge do they have? And where do we target to make sure that we all feel confident in talking about this as we move forward? And finally, we really want to make sure that people understand the essence of the project is in the belief that 5 in 5 people have mental health. We want to create like the word mental health, that it means a mental illness diagnosis or something that has been clinically looked at. No, everybody has mental health. And what we're trying to do, just like we would understand physical health because we can see the physical body, we're just trying to build the brain and really support the mental health. And we just like to do that through the lens of the 8 domains.
Absolutely. Mental health is one aspect of our overall health.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you're right. That gets lost in the wording. Maybe it's kind of driven by that stigma around mental illness, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I hope that as we move through these, the project, our conversations, that we can open that door and reduce some of the biases that we maybe even grew up with ourselves and the judgments that come along with that.
Absolutely. And I think that brings us to our next point about our philosophy, that you really have to look at that whole picture. That's what well-being is. You can't look at one piece. It gives you, I guess, the wrong picture of your wellness. If you're just looking at one area, usually that focus would be on an area that you're having a challenge in, because it's like this squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of philosophy, that piece, maybe it's my emotional wellness. If I'm struggling because of the pandemic, for example, that area is going to be calling for attention. But if you only pay attention to that, you're going to start to lose the balance in other areas. And so we really need to look at all areas of our life and how they relate to each other, which is the essence of the wellness wheel, because all areas are interconnected.
Just as we talk lots about, we call it a wellness wheel. We really like the analogy around the tire. It gets deflated, but the tire is constantly moving. So where that deflation is might be different all the time. So we really have to acknowledge that just because it feels like it's maybe our finances about what we're talking about today is where the struggle is, more often than not, that is going to be interconnected with all of those other pieces, because we know if you're struggling with money means there's stress involved. So your emotional wellness, often that can impact your social connections, and even it can impact us physically, right? Stress, physical response as well. And then do we change up how we're eating? Maybe we're not eating as well. We're trying to save money. So we think that these cheaper options are the better way to do that. And I'm not saying any of this out of judgment of what people are picking and choosing right now, just purely to show that the impact is large and it is going to affect us. And as that wheel is constantly moving, we have got to acknowledge where those imbalances are in order to inflate it in the best way that we possibly can to move on down the road in the safest possible way.
Exactly. This is just a slide that we like to show because we really like the word harmony. And I think that's where we're at with the holistic approach and the wellness wheel, that we need to connect those areas to create harmony in our overall well-being. Shannon talked a little bit. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm probably going to say the same thing. So go ahead.
We talked a little bit about the wellness wheel already, and it is a tool that we can use, and because it's a great it's a great way to look at something. A circle is an easy visual tool to be able to look at, and it really shows how everything is interdependent and how everything is equally important.
And what I like about this too, is it's self-exploration, right? We're not
Hmm.
having somebody else do the assessment necessarily. And I'm not saying you can't reach out for somebody else to do that, but let's start here. Let's start at that self-assessment piece. We've created a nice, very easy product to use as far as just going through some questions, really determining, where the impacts are, because often it surprises us, right? Where we might think that it's our financial wellness, obviously, that's where I'm struggling. When we do that self assessment, we can realize that, oh my goodness, maybe that's because the occupation I'm in right now doesn't work for me. And by no means, I'm not suggesting run out, quit your job now by any means, but maybe there's a way to make that occupation something that does suit you. Or maybe it's time to make some plans that you want your life to go in a different direction, and I think we are, really good examples of that. We, as much as we stay in this industry of human services in one capacity or another, we're seekers too. I think somebody just called us that. And definitely we're always looking, because that's what we like. We like to learn new things. We like to find out new things about ourselves and about others. And that sometimes can impact those other financial pieces and even the emotional piece as well.
So if you'd like our self-assessment tool, connect with us through email or contact us through our website, because it does give us, or it gives you a great idea of where you're sitting. So once you do the self-assessment tool, you'll be able to see on, this is an example here in this slide of what someone's wheel might look like when it is out of sync in certain areas. So maybe your financial wellness is actually pretty good. Maybe it is sitting at a 7, but your spiritual wellness is at a 4. And this assessment tool will help you map it out so you can see where areas are the areas of your life that you're really strong in. And then you can use those areas to help you lift up and inflate, if we're going to use the tire analogy, inflate those other areas to get a more balanced and round wheel.
And I think what I like about that too is we often gravitate to the things that we understand the most. And that's
Yeah.
why we leave out those other things. So sometimes we do understand our finances, and everybody lands differently on what is a stress in their finances. I think we've learned that across time as well. So that's why we begin to ignore the areas that we're less confident about, where this, by doing this assessment, it can expose some of those things that maybe challenges us a little to look beyond just the one area. And we will build up each one of those by building up every one of those other aspects.
It's nice to have a visual tool as well.
I
I
agree.
think that it does help us be more realistic about where we're at with different things, because when you're just thinking about things, sometimes, like you said, Shannon, you're just not acknowledging, or maybe we don't understand one area. So it's just kind of gets a little gray and fuzzy in my mind if I don't really want to think about where I'm at spiritually, emotionally, or whatever it is, or financially. So having it on paper, answering some questions, I think it's a great way um, to uncover some different things in your life that you weren't aware of.
And I think we also have talked before. Your son is always has given me the example of that because he's played in an orchestra forever. And if you've ever sat down to go see an orchestra at the beginning when they're warming up, it actually sounds terrible. There's all these squeakings and bangings and all of these things. You can't possibly think that this is going to be a great performance by if you listen to any of that. But when you put it all together, those squeaking and banging, that is the assessment piece where we're really challenging the different parts and we're working on making something better. But when that orchestra puts together all of those sounds and are working in a cohesive way, it is an exceptionally beautiful sound that is unlike anything else. So that's all we're suggesting, is that if you want that orchestra to sound very nicely, you got to work on all of those other pieces as well.
It's that harmony again that we talked
Yeah.
about earlier. But it's interesting as well because it this is a great analogy for other reasons also, because I think we're not saying that everything has to be a 10, that you have to be a
No,
10 in every area, because it would be like an orchestra. If everyone was playing at a 10, there wouldn't be harmony.
no.
It would just sound loud and obnoxious. But if we allow one area to maybe ebb and flow, and one area is going to kind of take over because you're not feeling well or you're having a struggle, and that ebb and flow is going to create a more harmonious and realistic life,
Yeah.
just like the orchestra. So I think that analogy works so great for so many things. So talking about specifically about the financial wellness, of course, it involves a process of learning how to successfully manage your financial expenses. Living within your means is crucial. Of course, we will talk about this a little bit later as well. And like Shannon said, that when this area can cause us a lot of stress, and stress can then impact our physical wellness also.
Oh, absolutely. In so many ways, right? And I think that that's the important thing to really remember, that when we talk about it, some anxiety and fear, when those things get in the way, it is really hard to manage things or be able to see things clearly, that maybe the situation isn't as bad, but we've
Mhm.
created a scenario in our mind that makes it feel really bad.
Yeah, I like to think of fear almost like a dark shadow. And because we do let fear kind of take over our lives sometimes, and it can be um unrealistic, for lack of better words. Sometimes are irrational. That's the word I'm looking for. Sometimes fear can be irrational, and it just creates this dark shadow in our lives, and it takes over a lot of things. So we need to kind of sort through things to get a better view of where we're at.
And I think when we're like helping families with their kiddos that we see a lot of behavior in, often that's where I start the conversation is that about fear, right? So adults are the same. When we're fearful about something, we tend to create all this other kind of behavior over here to deflect from what we're not prepared to deal with. So it's just challenging yourself on those kind of things as well, that where is this behavior, some maybe irrational things, or you're super grumpy with people and you don't even know why, because you don't even want to be upset with them, but you can feel yourself reacting on things. It's to challenge yourself to say, okay, what is welling up inside of me that am reacting this way, or I am behaving this way.
Mhm. So when we look at financial wellness, we like to look at four main elements, not elephants, of tripping over my words today. So four main elements of financial wellness. So spending, saving, borrowing, and planning. And balancing these elements can help us achieve a better financial health by making sure that we meet our financial needs and don't spend more than we earn. Now, we think this is obvious, but we can easily get ourselves into a hole with spending because we're not always keeping track of our inputs and outputs, kind of a thing, right? The
Yeah.
same as what we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing, not to be afraid of what that looks like. I get it. I've talked lots about living in a scenario where you just simply, I did not have enough money from A to B kind of thing. So I do get that. I do get the avoidance of that and just trying to pay to kind of move forward just a little bit. But this is where the learning comes in, where we
Mhm.
want to start young with kids as well. I think probably the best course I did take in high school was an accounting course, even though it's very simple, but it gave me some very good information about how do you manage your bank account, the income, the outflow, all of those kind of things, the credits, the debits, just understanding those things. So when, a bank person or somebody is talking to you, you understand the language. I know there's nothing worse than even when you walk into a new job and everybody seems to have their own lingo around things. Financial people, it's the same thing. They just have a lingo that we need to understand, not be afraid of. We can learn it. We just need to break it down and start from the beginning. And in fairness, when we look at an accountant, they started off with all of those, they didn't know anything more than us. They just had those basic, learn from those basic courses. And that's just what we need to be able to talk the lingo and understand what we are putting into our account, what we are taking out. How do we find that balance in that? And then reaching out. It's okay. Not everybody's a specialist in everything. So reaching out to the people, whether that is somebody at a bank, a financial person. We had a great podcast where we talked to Roxanne Arnell and from Clarity Financial. And honestly, I thought we were going to have this full-on financial conversation. And I was almost concerned, am I up to the task? I don't know. Can I keep up with
Exactly.
what? But she just brought back and really talked about how to serve the person, understand the person of who they are and what's important to them, what are their priorities. And then you begin to make financial plans around that. It's such an exceptional conversation that I think that if there's any place to start because you don't know where to start, that might be a great option as well.
Well, and she was really able to strip everything down, take us
Mhm.
back to the basics. And one thing that she said that I think is, it's sounds so simple, but I think a lot of us aren't doing it. It's just always knowing what's going on with your bank account, taking a look, set a time, whether it's once a month, twice a month, once a week, whatever you need to actually really look at where you're at financially. I know, Shannon, you and I, we were talking about the increase of our power bills, and both of us, we had received those in the mail, maybe a week or so ago, but neither of us had looked at it because we were just avoiding it. And of course, we were going to look at it, but that's what happens is we start avoiding when we're struggling financially, and avoiding is not going to help anything because it becomes super overwhelming when you do that. And then it causes that stress, and it's that whole domino effect. So that was the such a basic strategy, but so crucial. Just take a look at where you're at, and then you're going to be able to know where you can cut things down a little bit and where you can put extra money. So if you are trying to really work hard to build up a savings, it doesn't have to be a lot of money. But even if you were going to save $10 a month, $20 a month, 25, whatever it is, even if it's that small of an amount, it still can build up and you can have a savings over time. But you have to know where you can actually cut something if you want to start saving. So
Mm.
just taking a look at that is really important.
Well, and just when we go on that interconnected piece, I think of the environmental wellness, which I'm sure everybody's thinking, what? We're talking finances here, but just an environmental way of a few simple things you can do because maybe you don't have the $10 to put away. But,
Mhm.
as I've always had our kids do and things like that, is collect bottles, right?
Yeah,
All of a sudden that maybe that becomes the thing that you don't touch, that becomes the savings. So even if it's $5 a week, that's awesome. And you're also, stepping into that other realm of that environmental piece. All you have to do is save the bottles. All you need to do is every once in a while go out for a walk, impacting that physical wellness too. Collect some bottles, take a bag with you, and then that could be your savings. That could be the beginning of it. Or you can certainly be teaching your children, here's your savings. This is how we're going to do that. And I think the other important point to that is always know that you're going to reward yourself. We started with kids young that, of course, when you're working hard, you get a reward. Whether that started with in school and you got a sticker or you got some free time or whatever it is, put that in the scenario too, that if you're looking at your finances, looking at breaking up those pieces that are really important to your finances, of course, like we're talking about the power bill, we all have to pay it no matter what, or we don't have power. So there's some absolutes that we've got to pay our mortgage or we have to pay our rent. We've got to pay those kind of things. But then let's find a way where we can have that reward pile too, whether it's $1 or $2, and where we need to get that from. if that is something like I have done and I continue to do is collect bottles, then that could be where that reward pile comes from as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah, then it's not like you're dipping into a pot that is already low to
Yes.
get that reward.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Well, we are going to talk about borrowing and planning as we
Yes.
move on, but I think right now we are into the spending. I think we've addressed this. Um, Maybe we need to talk a little bit about creating a budget as well. And I think that starts with looking at where you're at with finances. And a budget sounds like it is limiting, but a budget can have in those rewards, right? That's what the whole point of a budget is, because often we were going to address the emotional spending, because often when we are stressed, we are fearful, there's so much going on in our lives that we can have some emotional spending going on. But if you plan for it, if you plan a reward, you use whatever pot of money that you're going to use, if it's from your bottles or it's from maybe you get mileage at work, or maybe you get some type of bonus, or if you're in the service industry and you get tips, maybe that's some of that goes into your reward spending, but that is in your budget. So you can see it, look forward to it. And maybe that helps alleviate some of the fear, because we see everything on paper, we see what's there, and that's part of the planning.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I think Roxanne said another interesting thing, and it's about that disconnection with money, because we
Mhm.
don't, it's not too often anymore that we have actual cash in hand. So you think about, for us, that we grew up in a time with money before cards ever played a part of that. So we've grown up across that and then cards. But that is not real money. So it's hard to understand when you're just looking at one card, what does that actually represent? So I really like that idea of making it a little bit more visual, especially for kids, but I think even we need it as well, to be able to really see, whether you create a little chart, or it doesn't have to be fancy, about here's what's coming in, here's what has to be paid, here's maybe we only have a little extra, or here's our goal that we want to have $50 extra. What are some ideas that we could get that? And here's our reward pot that we want to make sure we have at least $25 for a reward, or whatever it is, like wherever your finances land. Then you can actually start putting in a very concrete visual sense each pot of money, and know what kind of comes and goes. And it's such a great learning for our kids as well, to be able to see that, because that card represents nothing. It's infinite basically in a kid's
Yeah,
mind, right? Well, just
sure.
get your card out. I've heard so many kids across the
That's what I
years
was
say
just going to
that.
say. Yeah,
Yeah,
use your money card.
use your money card, just get it out, you put it in, and we walk away, right?
Well, especially now with tap,
Oh,
I think that's even more disconnection. Like, I remember
mhm.
having to put my PIN number in somewhere recently, and it's like, I haven't used my PIN number for a while because I tap things. And so yeah, definitely more disconnection with our
And easier
using our
access.
debit cards.
At least if you have a
Yeah,
password, you can't remember, it stops you no matter what. It is definitely something you have to think about, but even stopping in time while you're about to make that purchase, when you have to
exactly.
remember all of those numbers, it gives you that more objective, oh my goodness, this is what I'm really doing. I think that, I'm just as guilty as many. I am the new version of the window shopper. I have carts in all kinds of places. I'd love to have that coat, and I really would like to have those shoes, and I love those pants. And I literally have carts everywhere. But I try to make a rule of myself to not just hit buy right away. I
Well,
come
yeah,
back.
because do you notice that a lot of places that you do have an account with, or that you shop with frequently, save your credit card information? So
Yes.
that's another disconnect as well, because you don't even have to get up and get your credit card, or you don't have to worry about trying to memorize your credit card number. And so I think that's a great plan, is to kind of reconnect us. It's stripping it down again, bringing it back to the basics, reconnecting us with our money. I think is
Mhm.
very important, because I don't think without that reconnection, we're not going to be able to get into the savings part of our budget.
And you look at like an Apple Pay alone. Sure, you can buy, I do it all the time. I did it last night. I found two more songs that I really liked, and it seems like nothing. 99 cents. What is that? Right? It seems nothing until you start adding up everything about it. And certainly right in this moment, the 99 cents probably isn't going to bother me. But if I have 199 cents or 200, because it seems so easy, I just double click. So I'm not
Yeah.
having to go search it out. If I had to go look for that loonie to pay that, well, it wouldn't have happened last night, that's for sure, because I don't even know, right?
Yeah.
I would have to take time to go get that. So it's just stepping back every once in a while to allow that objective piece of your brain, because you had brought up, Paula, about that emotional spending. And sometimes we just feel we need rewarded for whatever reason, and that is okay. But just give yourself a few moments so that, is it okay? Is it, when we look at those different columns, does it fit within that reward column? Is that something we could do right now? Or honestly, is that coat that I absolutely thought I would love and adore, is it not going to be there a month from now? Probably.
Yeah. Since we talked to Roxanne when we did our podcast, I have been trying to use a little bit more cash instead of always my card. And what I've noticed that, well, I've been trying to do a couple of things. So use a bit more cash. And then I've been trying to save as well. And so what I notice is when I'm going to actually use cash, I think about it. Maybe I change my mind. And then what I've been doing as well is if I was going to buy maybe a coffee, but I didn't really need a coffee, I could have had coffee at home, at my office, then I decide not to do that. Sometimes I will actually take that cash and then put it in I have a little jar that I've been using at home. Take that, I was going to purchase whatever I was going to purchase. If it was $5, a $5 specialty coffee or whatever, I'll put that in my little money jar at home. So that can be for a reward. But then what I find is that when it comes time and I've built up a bit of cash in that jar, then I don't really want to spend it because I like having it.
Yeah.
So, it's just interesting. I think I'm thinking a little bit differently about spending and saving, and also because of where we're at in the world, and because we've been talking about it a little bit more as well, and kind of unpacking things around our finances and around our well-being in general.
And I know my nieces have done that for years too. They've always had this really cute little jar about travel money.
Mhm.
And it can sit on, looks nice in their bedroom and all of those kind of things. And it is very concrete again. As you see it filling up, it just feels way more hopeful. There is something actually there. It does put value in what's actually in that jar, as opposed to if it sat in a bank account. And not suggesting you shouldn't use a bank account, because I absolutely believe you should. But sometimes that is just that disconnect because it's that step away.
Mhm.
But I think another, kind of tip or trick or whatever that I like to use is, we have these lovely iPhones that are supposed to be extremely smart, and I'm confident mine is smarter than me. I have no doubt about that, because I know I don't know how to use all of it. But I certainly like to use the notifications in that. So I set up when my bills need to be paid so that it does notify me. It reminds me that lots of times those are just going to come out of my bank account, but it reminds me there is money coming out of that bank account too. So I know what the month is going to look like. It just puts value in it, reminds you, oh, this is up and coming. I better go check the account just to make sure the right money is sitting in that account for that to actually to happen. But I just think it just keeps me aware of it and challenges me to look at it all the time as well.
That's a great idea because I find, well, I think we've said this recently too, what is happening to the time? It's already the end of February. And for me, most of my bills have to be paid before the end of that first week in the next month.
Yes.
And if I'm not paying attention and I have to pay my bills online, it takes a few days for that transaction to process. Well, then I'm getting a late fee. And there was a time when I was, maybe busier than normal. I don't know why I was continued to be late on a couple of bills. And I was looking at it, it's like these late fees, well, I could have bought, 4 specialty coffees or whatever it was in that time.
Good.
It's
Yes.
maybe it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but if I continue to do that month after month after month with more than one bill, you're accumulating extra costs there that you don't need to. So yeah, I think using those tools like smartphones, what a great idea. I'm going to have to do that.
Well, and I think too, it's like you said, time seems to move quickly, but we've got so many things on our brain, right? You think of a
Yeah.
family too. You've got kids, you're thinking for them. They've got things they need to get done, or you got to get to lessons, you got to get to school, you got to get homework done, all of those things. But then your work is taking time and energy and your mind out of things that you got to think about those kind of things. Oh, but then you've got supper and then you've got bills. So it's like, how many things can your brain actually hold in a good, feasible way? And I just had to accept the fact that, I've always felt I had a good memory, but not when when you're pulled in so many ways. That's crazy. Why wouldn't I just use something that can think that for me? So that's one thing off my plate. Maybe I can be a little bit less stressed about knowing it's going to remind me to go into my bank account to make sure that's there. I don't have to think, oh my goodness, I got to cook supper and I forgot to pay bills 3 weeks ago. Uh-oh.
Yeah, I know that, because then that's creating stress. That's unnecessary. So let's move on to some tips for beginning to save money. So setting realistic goals, I think, is key, because if you're setting goals that for money that you don't really have, it's going to end up causing a lot of stress and disappointment for yourself. And that's going to create a bit of a spiral where you're getting down on yourself. So setting some realistic goals about spending and saving. And if you are going to do things like collecting bottles or taking the bottles back that you have, that could be part of a goal. Goals don't have to be huge. Like, I want to go on a whirlwind tour of Europe or of South America. It can be small goals. Like, maybe you need a new winter coat next winter, or winter boots, or, maybe you want to take a trip to Edmonton and go see some kind of show or something. It doesn't have to be huge and grand, but you can set goals. Or it could even be, back it up. They could be smaller kind of everyday goals that are going to make your life a little bit easier, but you need to actually take a look at it and see where your goals are, or have, smaller goals, medium-sized goal, dream goals kind of thing. And then make saving a habit. So I like the collecting bottles. Make it a habit of going for a walk. If you see a bottle, pick it up. Or if you have bottles at home that you're recycling, actually take them back every month.
Mm. And I think too, there's two things I guess I was thinking about. We talked, we did a webinar around seniors and that transitioning of life
Mhm.
from maybe a full occupation, their full employment, to what is life going to look like, as they move forward. That's what we talk about in setting also realistic goals. Where do you want to be? Right?
Yeah.
What is that going to look like? That's a big part of the recreational piece that we originally took in our education, is that transition. And it speaks to the entire wheel in preparing for the future, because that can be a very emotional piece to it. But you have to be able to live, right? And when we look at what seniors are given for the senior pension benefits, things like that, that is not a lot of money. So whatever you can do to supplement that in some way so that you can maintain your living, and we're not talking extravagance. If you're in that realm, that's awesome. Not all of us are in there, but at least have something so you can still reward yourself when you want to, but you've planned ahead. So it's not something that catches you off guard that, oh my goodness, I'm now 65, I'm now 70. That seems to be the closer, 70, 72 is when people are closer now to moving on into hoping to be, as we call it, retirement, I guess, that you have something available to you. So maybe those hopes and dreams that you had, you can fulfill some of those. And I think that's just comes down to that planning piece again.
Mhm. I know when I went to a financial planner, which of course we talked about earlier, access someone else who really knows about planning and saving and all of that, because I didn't. And at first I was really just sitting there bobbing my head thinking, I have no clue what you're talking about, but I could take some of those words and research it a little bit and look it up. But it was really, I think what struck me was the person asked the question, um, where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years? She made us, my husband and I, think about that a little bit. And I think we weren't thinking about that so much because we were in the midst of parenting young kids, had so much money going out, activities, school fees, hot lunches, sports, all of that, right? And so it was really stressful to actually think forward, but you have to, because there's going to, time goes fast, like we said, right? You have to even just think about a little bit, where do you want to be? And then, access that support to help you plan for that.
Yeah, and I think that was, such a good part of the conversation with Roxanne as well, is really looking to the future. And doesn't that fit well with us being life coaches? Even
Mhm.
in the essence of not even specifically talking about money, we talk about what does that 1 year from now look like? Who do you want to be in that 1 year? When you look back and you say, oh, yeah, that's everything I said I was going to do in a year. It doesn't mean we don't have to be flexible, of course, and sometimes readjust. Things happen. That's what life is. We know that. But at least if you have a bit of a goal to know where you're headed, it makes life way easier. And the same with finances as well. If you've got a plan of that 1 year, 5 year, 10 year approach, doesn't mean it's solid in stone. Somebody encrypted it and now you're done. You can't change that path in any way. No, absolutely you can. But it does focus us a little bit more to say, okay, these are the things I need to get there. So how do I put those into practice now?
Yeah. And sometimes it's just a matter of opening a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it's not set in stone. It's just having a conversation. And as we know, one conversation can spark another conversation and can provide new goals and get you excited about things. So it's important to have conversations around finances and planning ahead as well.
Mm. And I think as we move into this conversation around borrowing, I think this is an interesting thing because I think it does come down to who you are as a person, what you can manage in the stress side of things, like in your emotions, in your relationships. Really have a good conversation if you are in a relationship of where you both land on that, because that can look dramatically different. And I think, when we're very idealistic, that we get involved with somebody and we don't always have the hard conversations about our beliefs and even our histories of how we grew up, what that looks like. And I think that can be an important thing. That doesn't mean you have to be perfectly aligned, but it's certainly, if you can understand each other and find some room for compromise in that, then you'll probably be okay. But when we talk about borrowing, there's risk involved in that. So difference in personality of what somebody can handle. And I think what made me learn that is having rental properties, because in my mind, when we first went down this path of having rental properties, it was just it was going to be a great write-off. It was going to be a great way to save and, create this basically a version of a pension without having a pension from somebody else down the road that we would be able to have as we move forward. But there is risk involved. So is that something for your own mental health when we look at that emotional realm? Is that something you can do? Or is it going to just create too much stress? So when we borrow, it's really understanding who we are in that and where you feel confident and comfortable in that, and having good conversations and understanding the cost. Because, Paula, like you said, those missed payments, they cost you money. So does interest. So
Mhm.
is there a way to get that interest back? Is there value in that? Because most people, it was an exorbitant amount how much Canadians have in borrowing right now. Well, now we're talking about a level of inflation. Well, if anyone ever lived in the 90s, I know that my first house, or it wasn't even a house, it was like a condo that I had, I was paying 14% interest on my mortgage.
Wow,
Like unheard of.
that is crazy.
It blows my mind now. And within, I think it was about 2 years, when we went to redo the mortgage, then it went down to below 6%. Well, I was going to have a party. I thought that was exceptional, which I have to reflect upon, because now I am grumpy if those mortgages are over 2.5%. Well, I think we're about to enter another world where we're going to see something different. So it's preparing for that and understanding. We're not just talking about credit card borrowing here. We are also talking about mortgages and things like that, lines of credit, all of those kind of things that I'm not dissuading anyone. Sometimes that opens up doors. If you've ever been an entrepreneur, you have to have a pretty solid foundation and understand it's going to come through borrowing more often than not. But how much risk are you willing to take on? How much can you emotionally take on?
So I think it is, again, digging a little bit deeper into your own feelings about things, your own history, but also, again, educating yourself on, finances in general. And there's lots of podcasts, lots of information out there now to understand what you're getting yourself into, and even interest rates in general. I think for myself, I didn't know what was a good interest rate to have on mortgage, or what prime meant, and how, like, when I first started out in my adult life, I didn't know a lot of those things. And so I had to really listen closely. If I was working with a financial advisor or at the bank, I had to pay attention and I had to ask questions. And I really had to set my ego aside, because I didn't know. Especially when you're young and you're starting out, why would you really know if I don't remember ever taking it in school? Maybe I did. Maybe I wasn't paying attention because it wasn't important to me at the time. But don't be afraid to ask the questions, because that is a huge part of learning. And if we hold things in, we just let things happen to us, it's going to throw our wellness out of sync in so many other ways.
Yes. I think it is a little bit about forgiveness. You don't know what you don't know. It's
Yeah.
just remembering that. But also it's it's spending the time to understand a little bit more about it, understanding who you are and what's your goals. Once again, it comes back to goals as well. Where do you want to be in that 1 year, that 5 year? What are things that are important for you before you kind of jump in to what that looks like? And I don't think there's a right or wrong for anyone. That's the thing. It doesn't matter what the person beside you does, because maybe that's something that they can live with and they see the value in the cost of it. If it's not something for you, that's okay as well. And it's just knowing that and forgiving what you don't know, like we said, but just really opening the door to understand some things. And I always think we go to a dance class, right? We ask for a dance teacher. We don't go for the financial advisor and say, hey, what can you teach me in dance? But for whatever reason, when it comes to a financial advisor, we're like, we should just know. Why?
Exactly. Yeah.
Why?
Why?
Why? People come and they take yoga from us all the time. How many people, are all, to some degree, we even kind of hear that there is, well, I don't know that much about yoga. Well, of course you don't. Why would you? Come on in, right? Let's learn something new, because that's why you come to the yoga instructor. So same thing, just apply
Yeah.
the philosophy. Just like you, we went and took a whole lot of extra education. We didn't know that. Now we do. That's awesome. Same thing with finances.
Well, what I find really interesting is that the financial advisors that I've went to are really excited about finance, and they're really excited about things that I'm not excited to
Yeah.
learn, but their enthusiasm for it, it rubs off on me, and I get interested because I'm sitting in front of someone who is interested, and they're throwing things out and they're talking about different things. And so then it's, yeah, I find that very interesting, but because I'm not naturally interested in the finances and accounting and all that kind of stuff. So you're absolutely right, Shannon. Go to a financial planner, ask the basic questions. When we met with Roxanne, she was all about that, getting back to the basics. And she take a listen to that podcast because she really talked about things in just basic terms that we could understand and made the financial wellness very interesting, I think, to both of us.
I agree. I came out inspired because she's inspired, right? It's like you said,
Exactly.
she is passionate about what she does. And there's nothing more exciting when you're speaking to somebody who's truly passionate about what they're doing. Of course, they're looking into the details. We're just trying to get the
Mhm.
basic understanding so we can get by and get on to the things that we love to do. So, like as Paula said, listen to that podcast, reach out, whether it is to Roxanne or somebody else, because they probably have the information.
Mhm. Yeah, so just step back, uh, take a look at your goals, and even just think about how do you plan? What does that mean to you? I think we've talked a lot about reflection, and the financial wellness is no different. It, like you said, Shannon, I totally agree that we all have different backgrounds around finances, and maybe you grew up not having a lot, and that's going to create a lot of anxiety around finances. Or maybe you did grow up with a lot, but you never had to plan, you didn't have to worry, and now you're in a situation where you do. And
Mm.
so that's going to look a lot different as well. So just take a moment, be reflective around it, think about the goals, do some planning, meet with someone, and talk to your partner or talk to someone that you trust about maybe ask what they're doing as far as planning.
Hmm. Yeah, you never know what you can learn from somebody else. Absolutely. There's just so many options. And when we open our mind to that and allow that exposure, of course, you're going to learn something.
Well, my sister and I just had a conversation. I actually didn't realize that she was so interested in learning about investing. And she was telling me about all these different sites that she was on and different things that she was learning about. And it's interesting, we talk usually weekly, and wow, we had never talked about that. That was just so interesting to me that, she had this interest outside of what we normally talk about. And so it's just opening conversations. I think that's really important.
I think that's so interesting because, even my son, he has a little bit of Bitcoin just because he was really interested in it. Well, that's out of my realm and understanding. So it's something, you're right, that's what we're moving forward with in one way or another. It's hard to predict at this point to what degree, but that's where the kids are moving. They understand something that is, not that real money that you put in your hand. My mom would never understand that. To her, real money is something that is in your hands because that's what she grew up with. Well, now our kids and young adults are moving on to something new. We have to learn about it so we can kind of be ahead of the game.
Absolutely. So again, connect with people in your community, someone at your local bank that you go to. There's lots of different financial advisors as well. And take a look at our mental health and wellbeing resource hub on our website, sagewellnessconnection.com. We have different resources connected. Just look under the link of financial wellness if that's the area that you're looking for, and we'll have some resources available there.
I like because we're trying to put, we keep talking about the unusual suspects under there as well, because family and community services, they are someone that also supports in a different
Absolutely.
way in that financial realm. So you never know. Check in with them, or you look at the adult learning. Sometimes there are some different courses that you can take that aren't going to take a bunch of time, but it's also going to give you some more information. So we'd like to have all different kind of resources under there that just might lead you down another path of learning or connect you with somebody else that can help you go in the direction that you want to go.
Please connect with us as well through our website or email. And if you have a topic that you'd like us to explore, let us know. And if you'd like more information about who we are and what we do, we would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.